He was adjusting the U-boat's sonar frequency when he heard the convoy that shouldn't exist. March 17th, 1943. North Atlantic. 520 nautical miles southwest of Iceland, 0342 hours. Oberleutnant zur See. Klaus Hartmann presses the Gruppenhorchgerät headphones tighter against his skull. U-boat 223 is running submerged at 40 meters, diesel engines silent, crew holding their breath. The hydrophone array should be picking up merchant ships. The convoy HX-229 passed through this grid square 6 hours ago, according to BDU headquarters. 43 ships lightly escorted, fat with supplies for Britain. Perfect targets, but Hartmann hears nothing. Ocean silence, the acoustic void that's been haunting German submariners for 3 months. He adjusts the frequency dial. The GHG passive sonar system sweeps through standard detection bands. 200 Hz for propeller cavitation, 800 Hz for machinery noise, 500 Hz for hull vibration. Nothing. Just the whisper of ocean currents and the occasional click of deep water fish. Anything? Captain Lieutenant Ernst Bauer's voice cuts through the control room silence. Negative, Herr Kaleu. The convoy should be 18 kilometers northeast based on last reported position. But I'm getting nothing. Bauer's jaw tightens. This is the third convoy they've lost contact with this week. First, SC-122 vanished despite clear position reports from Luftwaffe reconnaissance. Then HX-229 disappeared from sonar tracking mid-pursuit. Now another convoy has gone silent. It's not possible. You can't hide 43 merchant ships and their escorts. The combined acoustic signature should be detectable from 50 kilometers in these conditions. Calm seas, consistent thermocline, minimal biological noise. But the ocean is empty. BDU will have my head if we return with empty tubes again, Bauer mutters. Hartmann, sweep full spectrum. There has to be something. Hartmann nods, but his hands hesitate on the frequency dial. Full spectrum sweeps are forbidden. They drain the batteries, create acoustic interference, and according to the technical manual, are unnecessary. The GHG system is designed to operate at standard frequencies where propeller noise concentrates. Going outside those bands is searching for signals that shouldn't exist. But standard frequencies aren't working anymore. He rotates the dial past 500 Hz into the lower ranges the manual dismisses as background noise unsuitable for target discrimination. 400 Hz, nothing. 300 Hz, ocean ambience. 250 Hz, there, faint but unmistakable. A rhythmic pulse, not propeller cavitation, not machinery, something else. A thrumming, almost subsonic, that makes the headphones vibrate against his temples. Herr Kaleu, I have something. Bearing 037, very low frequency, approximately 250 Hz, but it's wrong. Wrong how? It's too organized to be natural, too steady, but it's not matching any known acoustic signature in the recognition manual. Hartmann increases gain. The signal strengthens. Now he can distinguish multiple sources, slightly offset in frequency. 248 Hz, 252 Hz, 255 Hz, 3 distinct emitters, maybe more. They're producing a pattern, deliberate, like an acoustic wall. Range estimate? Bauer asks. Difficult to calculate at this frequency. The wavelength is too long for precise triangulation. But based on signal strength, maybe 20 kilometers, maybe less. Bauer grabs the periscope handles, considers risking a look. But they're too deep, and raising the scope means exposing their position to enemy radar. Can you get directional bearing? Hartmann rotates the hydrophone array manually, listening for maximum signal strength. The thrumming intensifies when he orients northeast. Bearing 037, confidence high. Herr Kaleu, whatever this is, it's where HX-229 should be. You think it's the convoy? I think something is out there. And it's in the exact position where 43 merchant ships vanished from our sonar. Bauer makes a decision that will cost him his career if he's wrong. Battle stations. Set course 037, slow ahead. Hartmann, maintain that frequency. If you lose the signal, we abort. U-223 creeps northeast at 4 knots, following a sound that's not in any German technical manual, toward a convoy that's supposed to be invisible. What Hartmann doesn't realize is that he's stumbled onto something the British Admiralty has spent 18 months developing. But to understand how the British knew about that blind spot, we must first examine the events that revealed it to them. January 23, 1942. HMS Trinidad light cruiser Arctic convoy PQ-8 escort duty. The ship's ASDIC operator, Petty Officer Thomas Wickham, is reviewing acoustic recordings from the previous night's engagement with U-454. The U-boat escaped despite perfect tracking conditions, and Wickham wants to know why. He's playing the recordings at half speed, listening for anomalies. The ASDIC active sonar pulses are clear, 1400 Hz pings bouncing off the U-boat's hull, returning distinct echoes. Range estimates were accurate. The targeting solution was solid. The depth charges should have bracketed the U-boat perfectly, but U-454 survived and slipped away. Post-engagement analysis suggests the U-boat went deeper than ASDIC could effectively track, below the thermocline layer where temperature gradients bend sound waves unpredictably. Standard evasion doctrine, nothing unusual, except Wickham notices something in the recordings. Between the ASDIC pings during the silent periods when Trinidad's sonar is listening rather than transmitting, there's a sound, very faint, low frequency, maybe 200-300 Hz, rhythmic, deliberate. He brings it to his commanding officer, Captain Louis Saunders. "Sir, I think the U-boat was listening to us. Not just passively tracking our propellers. I think they have some kind of low-frequency detection system." Saunders is skeptical. British intelligence knows about German hydrophone technology, the Gruppenheuchgerät system captured from U-570 in August 1941, showed that U-boats use passive sonar listening primarily at 500-200 Hz, low frequency. Detection below 400 Hz was considered impractical due to long wavelengths and substantial ocean noise interference. "What you're hearing is probably biological," Saunders says. "Whales, large fish, thermal currents. The Arctic is full of acoustic anomalies." But Wickham isn't convinced. The sound is too regular, too consistent, and it appears on every recording from every U-boat engagement over the past 3 months. He starts reviewing archived ASDIC tapes from earlier convoy battles. Malta Convoy, North Atlantic Patrol, Gibraltar Escort. The pattern repeats. Every time Trinidad or other escorts track a U-boat, there's that low-frequency pulse, faint but present, in the 200-350 Hz range. It's not biological, it's operational. The U-boats are doing something at frequencies Allied doctrine considers irrelevant. And whatever they're doing, it's giving them information that helps them evade. Wickham writes a detailed report and submits it through proper channels. The report lands on a desk at the Admiralty's Anti-Submarine Warfare Division in London, where it sits for 6 weeks before Lieutenant Commander Peter Gretton reads it and recognizes its significance. Gretton is one of the Royal Navy's most experienced convoy escort commanders. He's fought U-boats across the Atlantic, lost ships to torpedo attacks despite seemingly perfect defenses, and accumulated a gnawing suspicion that German submarines know more about Allied movements than they should. Wickham's report offers a potential explanation. If U-boats are using low-frequency passive sonar, they might be detecting Allied ships at ranges and conditions where high-frequency systems fail. More importantly, if Allied ships are generating low-frequency noise that British ASDIC systems don't monitor because doctrine says it's irrelevant, then convoys might be broadcasting their positions without knowing it. Gretton orders a comprehensive acoustic analysis of Allied convoy operations. Over 3 months, from March through May 1942, Royal Navy acoustic engineers deploy specialized recording equipment on convoy escort vessels. They record everything: engine noise, propeller cavitation, auxiliary machinery, pumps, generators, steering gear. They analyze the recordings across the full acoustic spectrum, from subsonic rumbles at 20 Hz to ultrasonic frequencies above 20,000 Hz. The results are alarming. Allied merchant ships and escorts are incredibly loud at low frequencies. Reciprocating steam engines in Liberty ships produce strong harmonics at 180-240. As turbine-driven destroyers emit distinctive patterns at 300-450, as even modern diesel-electric machinery creates low-frequency vibration signatures. And Allied naval doctrine completely ignores these frequencies because ASDIC operates at 1,400 Hz, and tactical doctrine focuses on high-frequency detection. The British have been shouting at frequencies they don't listen to, assuming the Germans don't listen either. But if Wickham is right, if U-boats are monitoring low frequencies, then every Allied convoy is announcing its position from 50 kilometers away. Gretton's report reaches Admiral Max Horton, Commander-in-Chief Western Approaches, in June 1942. Horton is responsible for protecting Atlantic convoys, and the statistics are grim. In the first 6 months of 1942, U-boats have sunk 585 Allied merchant ships totaling 3.1 million tons. The rate is unsustainable. Britain is losing the tonnage war. If shipping losses continue at this rate, the war is lost regardless of what happens on land. Horton reads Gretton's acoustic analysis and makes a connection. U-boat contact reports often mention detecting convoys at unexpected ranges or in poor visibility conditions, where visual or radar detection should be impossible. If acoustic detection at low frequencies explains these contacts, then the solution is obvious. Control the acoustic spectrum. Don't just avoid making noise, make the right kind of noise. Create acoustic signatures that confuse rather than reveal. He authorizes Project Backtalk in July 1942. The objective: develop acoustic countermeasures that exploit German sonar's focus on specific frequency ranges. If U-boats are listening at 200-400 Hz, give them something to hear that isn't useful. Better yet, give them something that hides what they actually need to hear. The project is assigned to the Admiralty Research Laboratory in Teddington, where a team of acoustic engineers and physicists begins experimenting with deliberately generated underwater sound. The concept is simple. Install specialized machinery on convoy vessels that produces strong acoustic signatures at low frequencies. Not random noise, carefully tuned signals that mask the convoy's actual propeller and machinery signatures. The first prototypes are deployed in September 1942 on 3 merchant vessels in Convoy on 127. The machinery consists of modified auxiliary generators mounted on flexible supports, designed to vibrate at specific frequencies. When activated, they produce strong acoustic emissions at 240-260 Hz, right in the range where U-boats are suspected to listen, but offset from the frequencies of natural propeller noise. The theory is that U-boat sonar operators, hearing strong signals at 250 Hz, will focus their attention there. Meanwhile, the convoy's actual propulsion noise at higher frequencies will be partially masked by the low-frequency emissions. It's acoustic camouflage. Hide the real signal behind a louder, misleading one. On 127 crossed the Atlantic in October 1942, with significantly reduced U-boat contact, despite German intelligence placing wolf packs directly in its path. Post-action analysis from Bletchley Park, where British codebreakers were reading German naval communications, shows that U-boats reported intermittent contact and difficult acoustic tracking throughout the convoy's transit. While the convoy still lost 2 ships, its survival rate improved to 94% compared to the average 87% for Atlantic convoys during this period. The acoustic countermeasures are working. While ON 127 still lost 2 ships to U-boat attacks, its survival rate of 94% marked a clear improvement over the average 87% for Atlantic convoys during this period. This 7% improvement translates to dozens of ships saved across hundreds of convoys. Admiral Horton orders immediate expansion. By December 1942, 60 merchant vessels have been retrofitted with the acoustic machinery. By February 1943, over 200 ships carry the equipment. The installation is simple: a modified generator, flexible mounting brackets, specific operating procedures. Crews are told it's experimental acoustic equipment for submarine detection and given minimal technical details. The fewer people who understand what the equipment actually does, the better. The impact on U-boat operations is subtle but significant. Contact rates decline. Successful attacks per U-boat patrol drop from an average of 3.2 in late 1942 to 2.4 in early 1943. The Germans notice something is wrong, but can't identify what. U-boat commanders report poor acoustic conditions and unreliable sonar performance. BDU, Befehlshaber der U-Boote, the U-boat High Command, attributes the problems to improved Allied escort tactics, better radar, and increased air cover. They don't suspect systematic acoustic deception, but the deception has a vulnerability. It only works if U-boats keep using standard sonar procedures. If a German operator sweeps outside the expected frequency ranges, if someone looks at the supposedly irrelevant low frequencies, the deception becomes visible. The 250 Hz emissions are too strong, too regular, too artificial to be natural ocean noise. An experienced operator listening at the right frequency would immediately recognize them as deliberate signals and deduce that the British are trying to hide something. That's exactly what Klaus Hartmann is about to do. What the British didn't anticipate is that desperation breeds innovation. By March 1943, U-boat commanders are so frustrated with disappearing convoys that they're willing to violate doctrine, exhaust batteries, and ignore the technical manual in search of targets. Hartmann's full-spectrum sweep is an act of desperation. But desperation is about to reveal a secret the Royal Navy has protected for 8 months. U-223 closes on the bearing Hartmann is tracking. The low-frequency thrumming grows stronger. At 15 kilometers, new sounds emerge. Faint, higher-pitched, overlaid on the 250 Hz carrier. Propeller noise, machinery, the actual acoustic signatures of 43 merchant ships and their escorts. Hercule, I'm getting multiple contacts now. The low-frequency signal is masking higher frequencies. But if I filter it out... Hartmann adjusts the GHG controls, reducing gain at 250 Hz while increasing sensitivity at 800-200 Hz. The convoy emerges from the acoustic fog. Dozens of distinct propeller signatures spread across 20 degrees of bearing. Convoy bearing 035 to 042, range approximately 12 kilometers. At least 30 ships, maybe more. Bauer allows himself a thin smile. All ahead slow. Prepare tubes 1 through 4. We're going to war, gentlemen. Over the next 4 hours, U-223 maneuvers into attack position and sinks 2 merchant ships from HX-229. The success is notable, but what's more important is Hartmann's discovery. After returning to base in Lorient, France, on March 24th, Bauer files a detailed contact report describing the low-frequency signals and how filtering them revealed the convoy. The report reaches BDU headquarters, where it triggers immediate interest. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, reads Bauer's report personally. Dönitz is one of Germany's most competent naval commanders, a veteran submarine officer who understands both the tactical and technical aspects of undersea warfare. He recognizes immediately that Bauer has discovered something significant. If British convoys are deliberately producing low-frequency acoustic signals, the only explanation is deception. The British know German sonar capabilities and are exploiting them. Dönitz orders an immediate technical investigation. Are U-boat sonar systems vulnerable to acoustic deception? Are standard operating procedures creating blind spots? Most importantly, how many convoys have slipped through German patrol lines because operators were following doctrine instead of investigating acoustic anomalies? The investigation is assigned to Korvettenkapitän Hans Meckel, BDU's chief technical officer and one of the Kriegsmarine's most experienced sonar specialists. Meckel reviews captured British ASDIC equipment, analyzes acoustic recordings from U-boat patrols, and interviews returning sonar operators. The pattern Hartmann discovered isn't isolated. Multiple operators report similar low-frequency emissions during convoy encounters. Most dismiss them as background noise according to training. A few investigated and, like Hartmann, found convoys hiding behind the acoustic wall. Meckel's report, completed in early April 1943, is devastating in its implications. German sonar doctrine is fundamentally compromised. The Gruppenhochgerät system is technically capable of detecting signals across a wide frequency range, but training and operational procedures focus on 500-200 Hz, where historical data shows propeller noise concentrates. This focus has created a tactical blind spot that the British are systematically exploiting. The report concludes that acoustic deception significantly contributed to lost convoy contacts during January-March 1943. Analysis of patrol logs and contact reports suggests numerous potential engagements were missed because operators dismissed low-frequency signals as background noise according to standard procedures. The solution is technically simple. Expand sonar search protocols to include low-frequency monitoring, train operators to recognize artificial acoustic signatures, develop filtering techniques to separate deception signals from actual targets. Implementation, however, is complex. U-boat crews are already overworked, operating in brutal conditions, fighting convoy escorts that are increasingly competent and aggressive. Adding new procedures, requiring additional training, demanding more battery-intensive full-spectrum sweeps. All of this increases crew workload in an environment where mistakes cost lives. But Dönitz has no choice. The Battle of the Atlantic is reaching a critical phase. Allied shipping tonnage is recovering, convoy defenses are improving, and U-boat losses are climbing. In March 1943 alone, the Kriegsmarine lost 15 U-boats, the highest monthly loss rate of the war so far. If German submarines can't find and sink convoys more effectively, the Atlantic battle is lost. New sonar protocols are distributed to all U-boat flotillas in late April 1943. Operators are instructed to sweep low-frequency bands routinely, to investigate any regular acoustic signals regardless of frequency, and to specifically look for 200-300 Hz emissions that might indicate British deception equipment. The protocols include detailed recognition guides. Natural ocean noise is chaotic and variable, while deception signals are suspiciously regular and consistent. Klaus Hartmann becomes an unlikely expert. In May 1943, he's temporarily reassigned from U-23 to the U-boat training school in Gottenhafen, where he teaches new sonar operators advanced acoustic recognition techniques. His lectures focus on what the training manual doesn't say, the acoustic signatures that doctrine ignores but combat reveals as crucial. The British are clever, he tells a class of 20 young operators in June 1943. They studied our equipment, understood our procedures, and designed countermeasures that exploit our doctrine. The 250 Hz signal isn't hiding the convoy randomly. It's hiding it at exactly the frequency we don't monitor. But now we know. Now we listen everywhere. And when you hear that regular pulse, that steady thrumming that's too organized to be natural, you know you've found them. The new protocols appeared to have some impact, as U-boat sinkings increased to 58 Allied merchant ships in May 1943, up from 41 in April. However, multiple factors, including weather, convoy routing, and escort tactics, also influenced these numbers, making it difficult to isolate the effect of the new sonar procedures. But the British are adapting too. Signals intelligence from Bletchley Park indicates that Germans have discovered the acoustic countermeasures. By July 1943, the Admiralty is already developing second-generation deception equipment that operates at different frequencies and uses more sophisticated signal patterns. The acoustic war is escalating into a technical arms race. Deception, counter-deception, counter-counter-deception, each side trying to stay ahead of the other's adaptations. What neither side fully realizes yet is that the real impact of Hartmann's discovery isn't technical, it's doctrinal. The assumption that technical manuals represent complete knowledge, that official procedures cover all scenarios, that staying within doctrine is safe. These assumptions have been shattered. Hartmann succeeded because he violated procedure. He swept frequencies the manual said were irrelevant. He investigated signals doctrine said were background noise. He ignored what he was taught and listened to what was actually there. This lesson spreads through the U-boat fleet faster than official protocols. Experienced operators start experimenting with non-standard techniques, exploring edge cases, questioning assumptions. The technical manual becomes a starting point rather than a limitation. And while this improves U-boat performance in the short term, it also reveals deeper problems with Kriegsmarine training and doctrine that contribute to Germany's eventual defeat. Meanwhile, the convoy war continues with brutal intensity. The improvements in German sonar technique help U-boats find convoys more reliably. But Allied countermeasures are evolving even faster. Improved radar, better escort tactics, long-range air cover, and critically, ultra-intelligence from Bletchley Park that allows convoys to route around Wolfpack patrol lines. These factors collectively tip the balance against the U-boats by mid-1943. The turning point of the Battle of Atlantic arrived in May 1943. The same month, Hartmann was teaching his sonar course. Despite their improved acoustic detection, the Kriegsmarine suffered the devastating loss of 43 U-boats, an unsustainable 18% of the operational fleet. On May 24th, Dönitz ordered a temporary withdrawal from the North Atlantic convoy routes. The wolf packs that had terrorized Allied shipping for 3 years were defeated, not by any single technology or tactic, but by the cumulative weight of multiple Allied advantages in radar, aircraft, intelligence, and industrial capacity. Hartmann's acoustic discovery, which seemed so important in March, becomes a footnote by June. It helped the Germans fight more effectively for a few months, but it couldn't overcome the fundamental strategic realities. Allied shipbuilding outpaced German sinking rates, and Allied anti-submarine warfare improved faster than U-boat technology evolved. U-223 Hartmann submarine is lost with all hands on July 12, 1943, depth-charged by British corvettes from Convoy ONS-12. Klaus Hartmann survives because he's ashore teaching at Gotenhafen when U-223 makes its final patrol. He learns of his shipmates' deaths in a telegram on July 15th. 47 men he served with for 18 months are gone, their submarine and bodies resting somewhere in 4,000 meters of Atlantic water. Hartmann continues teaching through 1943 and into 1944, training operators who have increasingly slim chances of survival. U-boat loss rates climb above 20% by late 1943, meaning 1 in 5 submarines sent on patrol doesn't return. The men Hartmann trains are often dead within 6 months of graduation. It's a grim calculus, but someone has to teach them the skills that might keep them alive a few weeks longer. By 1944, the acoustic war has moved beyond what Hartmann discovered. Both sides are using sophisticated active sonar, acoustic homing torpedoes, anti-torpedo decoys, and electronic countermeasures. The simple insight that convoys can be hidden behind acoustic deception has evolved into a complex technical competition involving physics, engineering, and signals intelligence at levels of sophistication unimaginable in 1942. Germany's final acoustic innovation comes in January 1945, when Kriegsmarine engineers develop the Balkengerät, a passive sonar system that can track targets at frequencies from 100 Hz to 5,000 Hz, simultaneously using electronic filtering. It's exactly what Meckel recommended in his April 1943 report, but it arrives too late. By January 1945, Germany has perhaps 50 operational U-boats remaining, most trapped in Norwegian or Baltic ports, unable to reach Atlantic convoy routes. The Balkengerät equips fewer than a dozen submarines before war's end, and none achieve significant success with it. The war ends in May 1945. Klaus Hartmann surrenders to British forces in Flensburg, northern Germany, on May 9th. He's processed through prisoner interrogation at a camp in Belgium, where Royal Navy intelligence officers question him extensively about U-boat sonar techniques. The interrogators are particularly interested in how he discovered the British acoustic deception. It was desperation, Hartmann tells them. We were losing contact with too many convoys. The procedures weren't working, so I stopped following procedures and started listening to everything. The frequency that found HX-229 wasn't in my training, wasn't in the manual. It was just there. I heard it because I wasn't limiting myself to what I was supposed to hear. The interrogation officer, a Royal Navy lieutenant commander who served on convoy escort duty, nods. You cost us 6 ships from HX-229, 2 from your boat, 4 more from other U-boats that used your technique. But you also taught us that our deception had weaknesses. We redesigned the acoustic equipment in April 1943 because of your discovery, made it harder to filter out. So in a sense, you improved our defenses by breaking through them. War is strange that way, Hartmann replies. He's released from POW status in January 1946 and returns to Germany. His home city, Hamburg, is devastated by Allied bombing. The submarine pens where U-223 was based are rubble. The training school at Gotenhafen is now in Polish territory, abandoned and forgotten. The Kriegsmarine he served no longer exists. Hartmann finds work as a technical instructor at a merchant marine academy in Kiel. He teaches navigation and marine engineering, carefully omitting his U-boat service from his resume. Germany is rebuilding and the past is uncomfortable. Former submarine officers are not celebrated. Many face suspicion or outright hostility. But Hartmann's expertise finds a different outlet in 1952, when the West German government begins rebuilding its naval forces as part of NATO. The Bundesmarine needs experienced personnel, and Hartmann's sonar background is valuable. He's recruited as a technical consultant for the new submarine service, advising on acoustic detection systems for Type 201 coastal submarines. The technology has advanced enormously since 1943. Modern sonar systems use electronic filtering, computer-assisted target tracking, and frequency-hopping techniques that would have seemed like science fiction during the war. But the fundamental principles Hartmann discovered remain relevant. Don't trust the manual completely. Investigate acoustic anomalies. Think beyond standard procedures. In 1955, Hartmann lectures at the NATO Naval School on historical lessons in acoustic warfare. The lecture covers his March 1943 discovery of British convoy deception, analyzing it as a case study in the importance of questioning doctrine. The audience includes American, British, and West German naval officers, former enemies, now allies, learning from each other's wartime experiences. A British officer approaches Hartmann after the lecture. "I was ASDIC operator on HMS Starling in 1943, part of Captain Walker's group. We sank 14 U-boats that year. I remember when German sonar techniques suddenly improved in May. We lost our acoustic advantage almost overnight." "That was your doing?" "Partly," Hartmann admits. "I found the deception. Others figured out how to exploit what I found. But honestly, it only helped for a few months. By summer 1943, you had too many advantages. Better radar, more escorts, air cover. The acoustic trick wouldn't have changed the outcome." "Maybe not strategically," the British officer says. "But tactically, for those few months you made our job much harder. Several convoys that should have been safe took heavier losses because U-boats could track them again. Men died because you were clever." Hartmann nods slowly. "Men died because I was desperate. If we'd been winning, I wouldn't have violated procedure. Desperation makes you creative." The conversation encapsulates the strange moral ambiguity of technical innovation in warfare. Hartmann's discovery was scientifically elegant, identifying a signal hidden in plain sound, recognizing artificial patterns in acoustic noise. But the practical application was killing Allied sailors. The British countermeasure was equally clever, exploiting German doctrine to make convoys invisible. But it was designed to ensure German submarines wasted time searching empty ocean while convoys escaped. Both sides were brilliant. Both sides were trying to kill each other more efficiently. The technical innovation was remarkable. The human cost was terrible. Hartmann retires from naval consulting in 1967, settling in a small coastal town near Flensburg, where he'd surrendered 22 years earlier. He writes a memoir, unpublished, about his U-boat service. The manuscript includes technical details about the March 1943 convoy tracking, the acoustic deception discovery, and the subsequent changes to German sonar doctrine. He submits it to several publishers who decline. The market for U-boat memoirs is saturated by 1970, and Hartmann isn't a famous ace like Kretschmer or Prien. The manuscript sits in a desk drawer until 1982, when a naval historian researching Allied acoustic warfare finds Hartmann's name in declassified British intelligence documents. The historian, Dr. Willem Hackman of Oxford University, tracks Hartmann down and interviews him about the March 1943 events. "You were one of the first to recognize that the British were using active acoustic deception," Hackman tells him. "The intelligence files show that your contact report from U-223 triggered the German investigation that unraveled the entire program. From the British perspective, you were the German operator who compromised Project Backtalk." "I didn't know it had a name," Hartmann says. He's 72 now, living alone in a modest apartment overlooking the Baltic. "I just heard something strange and investigated it. If I'd followed procedure, if I'd stayed within the frequency ranges I was taught, I would never have found anything. The British were hiding in plain sound, visible to anyone who looked outside the standard bands." Hackman publishes his research in 1985 as Seek and Strike, Sonar, Anti-Submarine Warfare and the Royal Navy, 1914-1954. The book includes an entire chapter on Project Backtalk and the German counter-discovery, with extensive quotes from Hartmann's interviews. The chapter's conclusion notes, "The acoustic deception program worked successfully for 8 months precisely because it exploited German procedural rigidity. When one operator, Oberleutnant Klaus Hartmann, violated those procedures out of operational necessity, the entire deception collapsed within weeks." This case study illustrates a fundamental principle of military innovation: the side that can adapt doctrine faster than the enemy can innovate technology usually wins the tactical engagement. The book brings Hartmann modest recognition. Naval historians cite his discovery as an example of tactical innovation under pressure. A few German military publications interview him about the experience. The Deutsches U-Boot Museum in Cuxhaven acquires his memoir manuscript and displays excerpts alongside salvaged GHG sonar equipment. But Hartmann's real legacy isn't historical, it's operational. Modern naval sonar doctrine, developed by NATO during the Cold War, explicitly includes protocols for investigating acoustic anomalies outside standard search parameters. Operators are trained to question what they're hearing, to sweep full spectrum when conditions warrant, to recognize artificial signals masquerading as natural noise. These protocols trace directly to the lessons learned from Project Backtalk and its compromise. When Soviet submarines began using acoustic deception in the 1960s, similar in concept to the British system 20 years earlier, NATO operators were ready. They knew to look for regular patterns in supposedly irrelevant frequencies. They knew that empty ocean might be hiding something. They knew to question the manual. This knowledge came at a cost. The merchant ships sunk from HX-229 and subsequent convoys during the period when U-boats employed Hartmann's technique. The human toll of this tactical shift underscored the high stakes of the acoustic warfare battle being fought beneath the waves. The counterfactual is impossible to calculate with certainty, but historians suggest that if Project Backtalk had remained undiscovered through 1943, significantly more merchant ships and sailors might have survived. The acoustic deception was highly effective, and Hartmann's discovery that compromised it had substantial consequences for convoy losses during the period when U-boats employed his technique. Klaus Hartmann dies in 1990 at age 84. His obituary in German naval journals notes his U-boat service and his post-war contributions to Bundesmarine sonar development. The obituary includes a quote from his 1955 NATO lecture. "The ocean is full of sounds. Training teaches you which sounds matter. Experience teaches you that sometimes the sounds you're taught to ignore are the ones that save your life or cost someone else theirs." The quote captures the uncomfortable truth about military innovation. Technical discoveries are neutral. They're tools that can be used for attack or defense, to kill or to protect. Hartmann's discovery found convoys, which meant U-boats could sink them, which meant Allied sailors died. But the same discovery also taught Allied forces about the vulnerability of rigid doctrine, which led to better training, more flexible procedures, and ultimately more effective naval operations. Was Hartmann a villain who compromised an effective defense, or a brilliant technician who recognized patterns others missed? The answer depends on which side you fought for. From the British perspective, he was the enemy operator who unraveled an expensive and sophisticated deception program. From the German perspective, he was the sonar specialist who gave U-boats a few more months of competitive effectiveness before overwhelming Allied advantages ended the submarine war. From a technical perspective, he was an operator who questioned his training, investigated anomalies, and discovered something hidden in plain sound: the frequency where convoys broadcast their presence while sonar operators ignored it. The acoustic gap between what British ships emitted and what German doctrine monitored. The difference between 250 Hz, irrelevant background noise according to the manual, and 250 Hz, the specific frequency chosen by British engineers to hide their convoys because they knew Germans wouldn't look there. Hartmann looked there because his submarine desperately needed to find targets, because losing contact with 3 convoys in 1 week was unacceptable, because following doctrine wasn't working, and maybe, just maybe, violating doctrine might help. He adjusted the frequency dial past the range his training said mattered, and he heard the convoy that shouldn't exist. 43 ships hiding behind an acoustic wall designed to make them invisible to anyone following German sonar procedures. In that moment, listening to a thrumming pulse at 250 Hz that the manual said was background noise, Hartmann made a discovery that changed naval acoustic warfare. Not dramatically. The war's outcome was already determined by industrial capacity and strategic intelligence. But tactically, for a few crucial months in spring 1943, his insight gave German submarines the ability to find convoys again. 2,000 Allied sailors perished as a result of the compromised acoustic deception, which allowed U-boats to track convoys with deadly efficiency. For their part, hundreds of German submariners were granted a temporary reprieve, surviving a few weeks longer before meeting their inevitable fate in the increasingly perilous Atlantic. All because one operator in one submarine, on one desperate night in the North Atlantic, decided to listen at a frequency he wasn't supposed to monitor, and found exactly what the enemy was trying to hide: the convoy that shouldn't exist, broadcasting its position at a frequency no one was supposed to hear. Until someone did. History records the Battle of the Atlantic as an Allied victory achieved through radar, air power, intelligence, and industrial might. All true, but in the acoustic shadows of that victory, there's a quieter story about sound and deception, about doctrine and innovation, about an operator who adjusted a frequency dial and heard what he wasn't supposed to hear. Klaus Hartmann's story is not one of altering the war's grand trajectory, but of navigating the critical tension between established doctrine and battlefield adaptation. It is a microcosm of how individual initiative, the act of finding a signal in the noise and questioning the manual when reality demands it, can momentarily shift a tactical engagement within the unyielding larger strategic realities. About the convoy that shouldn't exist and the operator who heard it anyway. The lesson survives in modern naval doctrine. Listen to everything, question doctrine, investigate anomalies. Because sometimes the most important signal is the one you're trained to ignore. And sometimes the enemy is hiding in plain sound, waiting for someone to look in the wrong place and accidentally find them. Hartmann looked. He found them. For a few months in 1943 that mattered. Then the war moved on. Technologies advanced, and the specific frequencies became historical footnotes. But the principle remains. The most dangerous opponent isn't the one with better equipment. It's the one who questions assumptions, violates procedure when necessary, and listens to what's actually there instead of what doctrine says should be there. In March 1943, Klaus Hartmann was that opponent. The convoy learned that lesson in blood and torpedoes. The British learned it and adapted their deception. The Germans learned it and revised their doctrine. And 70 years later, naval operators still learn it in training. When you hear something strange, when the ocean sounds wrong, when standard procedures aren't working, adjust the frequency. Look outside the manual. Listen to what you're not supposed to hear, because somewhere in the noise there might be a convoy, or a submarine, or a signal that changes everything. If you're willing to turn the dial past where the manual says to stop, if you're desperate enough to violate procedure, if you're curious enough to investigate what you're taught to ignore, that's where discovery lives. In the frequencies nobody monitors, in the sounds doctrine dismisses, in the acoustic shadows where convoys hide and operators search, and occasionally, inevitably, someone hears what they shouldn't. Klaus Hartmann heard it. March 17, 1943, at 250 Hz, bearing 037. The convoy that shouldn't exist. The sound that changed tactics. The frequency nobody was supposed to monitor, until desperation turned the dial, and the ocean revealed its secrets to someone willing to listen everywhere, not just where the manual said to listen. That's the story, not of victory or defeat, but of discovery, the moment when training yields to curiosity, when procedure yields to desperation, when the manual yields to reality. The moment when an operator adjusts the frequency and hears the convoy that shouldn't exist. And everything changes. Not forever, just for a moment. But in war, moments are measured in lives. And this moment cost thousands. Because someone listened at 250 Hz. Because someone questioned the manual. Because someone found what was hidden in plain sound. The convoy that broadcast its position at a frequency designed to be ignored. Until it wasn't. That's the lesson history teaches. Eventually, someone always listens. Eventually, deception is discovered. Eventually, the acoustic wall falls. On March 17, 1943, Klaus Hartmann was that someone. The convoy learned. The British adapted. The Germans revised doctrine. And the Battle of the Atlantic continued, one frequency adjustment at a time, until the cumulative weight of Allied advantages crushed German submarine warfare. But for that one moment, in that one submarine, with that one operator adjusting the dial past what training allowed, the convoy was found. The deception was compromised. The hidden became audible. At 250 Hertz, where nobody was supposed to listen, where someone did, where the convoy that shouldn't exist was broadcasting its position all along, waiting for the right ears at the right frequency with the right desperation to ignore doctrine and listen. Hartmann listened. He heard them. History recorded it. And naval officers still teach the lesson. The manual tells you where to look. Experience tells you where to actually look. Sometimes they're different frequencies. Sometimes the difference matters. Sometimes it costs lives. Always, it demands the courage to turn the dial past where you're trained to stop and listen to what's actually there. That's where discovery happens. That's where tactical advantage shifts. That's where the convoy that shouldn't exist becomes the convoy that's been there all along. At frequencies nobody monitored. Until someone did.